I understand what optimal means for me. I understand what my expectations are of me. And I also know why I'm doing it. And I think that is the clarity piece that people require to really fully answer the question that you ask. It depends on what aspect of our lives or life that we're looking to optimize, because I always recognize that there's probably areas that need more attention than others. And yet we all like to do things that we do really well at.
Welcome to the Wits and Weights podcast. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and this twice-a-week podcast is dedicated to helping you achieve physical self-mastery by getting stronger, optimizing your nutrition, and upgrading your body composition. We'll uncover science-backed strategies for movement, metabolism, muscle, and mindset with a skeptical eye on the fitness industry so you can look and feel your absolute best. Let's dive right in. Wits and Weights community, welcome to another episode of the Wits and Weights podcast. Today is all about fun, a functionally fit life that is, with my guest, Dai Manuel. You'll learn how to balance personal and professional roles while prioritizing fitness. We'll explore the concept of what optimal means in fitness and life, the role of fun in fitness, and practical strategies to find balance while living a fit life. In the world of business and lifestyle coaching, there are people who talk about leading a balanced life, and then there are those who embody it. Meet Dai Manuel, a man on an incredible mission to positively impact 1 million role models around the globe. As a super dad who leads by example, partner who keeps the flame alive by dating his wife of 21 years, and a high-octane life enthusiast, Dai showcases what it truly means to live a functionally fit life. Known for his award-winning digital thought leadership and best-selling publications, he's an extraordinary blend of business acumen and contagious enthusiasm. Some of that I've already gotten to meet before the recording here. Dai's journey as a co-founder, COO, and CMO of an 8-figure retail company, as well as a sought-after lifestyle mentor and executive performance coach, is not only impressive, but also inspiring. Navigating the balance beam of life's responsibilities while keeping health and happiness at the forefront, Dai knows the struggle of the juggle. His philosophy is based on 5 Fs: fitness, family, faith, finances, all wrapped under the roof of fun, built on a foundation of health. Dai's a dynamic speaker, author, and thought leader who's here to inspire you to take action and become the best version of yourself. Dai, thanks for bringing your energy to the show.
Thanks, Phil. That's oh man, I'm stoked to be here. I really am. I'm honored for the opportunity to have this conversation with you today. So I know we've had lots of back and forth and lots of opportunity to creep each other on social. And dude, I totally love everything that you stand for, but also the fact that we're both, we're fathers of daughters, man. And we got to band together, my man, band together.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, we both are at different stages of our lives, but can relate so much. And I'm sure the listener can as well. This is a fitness related podcast, as we talked about. And your foundation or your philosophy, your approach is based on a foundation of health and what you call functionally fit life. So I am about bringing the energy enthusiasm. So what does fitness and fun mean to you in this context?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, let's be fair here. There's a lot of, we'll say, misinformation and redirects, especially when you start going down the path of trying to define for oneself, what does health mean to me, right? Or what does being optimal mean to me? And there's lots of different directions we can go, and we can subjectify those answers. We can also objectify them. And it's usually best to have a bit of a blend, but it's the personal experience aspect, that really solidifies everything or takes it from knowledge to wisdom, right? It's that application of the knowledge to create a certain result. And I'll be fair, for those that they probably don't know my story, but I wasn't someone that naturally came to fitness. It came to it a little bit later in life, and when I say later in life, like in my teenage years, I discovered fitness at 15. But prior to that, I had, I was in a massive state of unhealth. I was morbidly obese. And along with that, a lot of other, stigmas, especially on the mental health challenges and the bullying. And, I was just, it was a tough place. A tough place. Like anyone that's struggling with chronic health conditions, especially if it's more lifestyle orientated, you can't help but look in the mirror all the time and be like, oh, is that me? And that was an everyday occurrence. And at 15, looking in the mirror one day, I was just like, I don't like who I'm looking at, and I don't want to be like this anymore. Because the fear of staying that way was not as great, or it was actually greater than the fear of changing.
Of change,
yeah. And that's when most people are really ready to make a change. And,
that's true.
And so I started that. It took me 5 years to get to that state of health. It took me about, just shy of 2 years to take off the weight and to develop a new lifestyle. And that really set me forward in this trajectory of wanting to help others with health and well-being changes, and taking control of their situation to maximize and optimize really the life that they want, and more or less get out of their own way, right? And to let things happen. And so over those years, now almost 30 years working in this space, I've heard it all, and I've done a lot of things. And so this philosophy has emerged, the Whole Life Fitness Manifesto was the book I published almost 8 years ago now. But it's really just a lot of very common sense type things. But as we all know with common sense, it's not so common. And, but fun. If you're not able to smile every day, there's room for improvement, and I find that no matter what challenge I encounter, that inner confidence I gain through the fitness aspect, this ability to do hard things, do challenging things, and know that I have the resilience to not only bring me through it, but also to pick myself up when I fall, because I do fall, and I fall a lot, figuratively and legitimately. And so that fun and fitness aspect are so critical in that foundation of health, because when that foundation is solid, family relationships are better. My working relationships are better. I show up more present, not only for those in my life, but also for myself. And so that's sort of what emerged in the 5S is really just alliteration to give people sort of some simpler and easier to follow context when they start to use those filters to apply to their own life.
Yeah, there's so much there to unpack, but I do want to dive in more on the fun piece of it, right? Because a few things come to mind, right? Is you mentioned doing hard things, and I know from personal experience, even just doing heavy squats, it's a simple mechanical thing that you're doing with your body, but it's also a form of meditation and growth that, like very few things in life, that you're able to control and change your body with, and that then causes you to be confident with other things. And I just spoke to my client, Carol, who, by the way, is going to be on probably the episode before this one when it comes out. And she talked about how she used to be very, she wouldn't speak her mind. And now that she lifts, she speaks her mind. And so, so it's fantastic. So I love that. When we talk about fun, how can we separate the idea of instant gratification fun from true, deep, meaningful fun?
Well, yeah, and that's a great question. And I wish I had a very straightforward answer. And I think as simple as I can answer this is, fun and fulfillment, I think, come in hand, and I think all of us are sort of on a path to want to optimize our level of fulfillment, joy, and happiness in our lives. Right. And we can't help it. But when we're having fun, adrenaline's going. We've got some other neurotransmitters that are firing in our brains, giving us that dopamine, that serotonin, and that lightening of our mood, but also gives us that little bit of an edge to maybe push ourselves to do things that otherwise we would deem we're not capable. And I find that if you can keep it fun, keep it real, and just trust that things are going to be okay, because it usually is, that good things happen. That's where really change not only takes hold, but we gain that ability to see ourselves as the change makers for our own lives. And I'll be fair in this statement, because, there's been periods in my life where I felt more like a victim of change, and it's a tough place to be. It's really hard to find motivation and to not continuously procrastinate or find other excuses to not do the things that we know if we just did them more consistently, we'd feel better. But it's a tough place to be, and so that's a long-winded answer to a very simple question.
No, but I think it's required to really think about it and step back, because some of the things resonate very much with me as a person who will be accused of making light of things or being too positive about things. For example, I had rotator cuff surgery a month ago, and I've been posting about it, and everybody's like, man, that's really positive. And then we'll have people that say, I had a similar situation. Now I have to have more surgeries. I'm not looking forward to it. And I notice there's just a different in mindset of how people approach things in terms of like positive psychology. And we want to be sure not to have the term I've heard is toxic positivity, right? Just like faking that it's positive or fun. Yeah. So the idea of the neurotransmitters and pushing us to do things we're not capable of, it sounds like what you're talking about again has to do with purpose, right? It has to do with growth, personal growth, purpose moving forward. And what do you say to somebody who wants to take a journey of growth? Let's say it's physical health, and they just don't like what it's going to take. So they know that they need to do something in the training realm, something in the nutrition realm, and you give them 10 options. And for whatever reason, it's just because of their life experiences. I don't want to do that. I don't like to do that, whatever. How do you try to make that fun somehow? Or do you have something that gets the flywheel momentum going that then makes it fun because of the results?
I love that. I love how you frame that, Philip. And because these are conversations that you and I both have very regularly with our clients, you know, and just probably our conversations on social, you know, because people know that we do suffer from a chronic ailment called PMA. And for people that don't know that, it's positive mental attitude, and it's chronic. And my wife and I we're guilty. We're sick of it. We're sick of you know, with PMA. And so I can appreciate that sometimes people, we'll just say, clam up, you know, if they get around people with that kind of outgoing energy. And, you know, I am sort of a more introverted in certain ways, but I'm also extroverted in certain ways. And I think everyone has that ability. And here's the interesting thing is to answer your question, you know, when we think about change, all of us at whatever stage we are in life have experienced a tremendous amount of change. You know, like to get to wherever we are, we've gone through lots of changes, and it's a given. It's a truth, you know, like Buddha, like 2,600 years ago, he's like, hey, you know what? This whole universe of ours, it's completely impermanent. Constant state of change, energy's exchanging from one thing to the other, you know, law of entropy, science caught up, you know, about 100 years ago and said, whoa, Buddha was right. You know, maybe everything's just a bunch of space and everything's changing. And yet I think a lot of us feel like Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know, there's a big boulder barreling down behind us. And it's a great metaphor for change, you know, and we feel like we're just trying to escape it. And what I'd like to do is invite people to share with me, tell me their stories of where they've experienced changes that created a positive result, even though the experience of the actual change might have been negative. And because we've all had that. I mean, change isn't necessarily easy. Otherwise, we'd all sign up and say, hey, can you give me some more change, please? You know, like just people aren't really lining up for it. Right. And especially when it comes to health changes, because, are they hard? Yeah. Are you having to rewire the brain to now create a new habit to override an old habit? And if that old habit was a 10-year habit, it's not going to just go away in 1 or 2 workouts or 1 or 2 salads. You know, like it takes a commitment and consistent effort and a frequency that is enough that it offsets the negative, you know, but it takes commitment. And so I find when people share a story, I'm like, man, you can handle change. You've done it before. Why is this health change so challenging? You know, and often you've probably heard about 1,000,001 excuses. And I only say excuses because they really are, you know, for the most part. And I mean, if you're using the same excuse more than once, it's a habit, you know, like,
there you go.
And so it's just a matter of having a good conversation to help people see that they are capable. And I find once they have that belief and that inner confidence, it at least is enough to get the momentum starting or create enough inertia for that first step, that first squat, that first squat off the couch, right? Before you take your first step on this new journey. And that, And I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Like, I'm sure you've had so many different conversations on this.
Yeah. I love how you when you mentioned a frequency that's enough to offset the negative, what came to mind to me was the idea of attacking resistance, of how we have 2 sides of the scale here. One is our actions, and you can call that willpower or discipline or taking that first step. And on the other side are all the things, whether they are excuses or just real things that are very hard for people to overcome. What can you do to reduce that side of the ledger, right? That's actually easier potentially than taking that action.
Yeah.
And then taking the action becomes even easier. Now, some of that also might be extrinsic, like coaches and your spouse or people who support you, where they're just pushing you to do it. And that's what you need. And then you end up taking the action. You're like, I don't like this. The next day, I don't like this. And then the third day, well, look what happened this week. I'm feeling great. And like you said, the result produces the motivation from there on.
Correct.
So that is my thought, Dai, but I do see a spectra of people, because there are people who are very just inherently, Eeyores. They're Eeyores.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's okay. It's okay. They just need a different type of communication style and maybe love from people. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, Philip, like even just listening to your podcast, like this is a wonderful example of a positive input. It's like, what do we feed our minds with every day? Right. Like, because our brains are sponges. It has the ability to pick up and learn new things, to adapt, to evolve, to be resilient, and allow us to grow into whatever vision we have for ourselves. But, we have to challenge the inputs if the outputs are not the results that we want in life. And so that means, like Jim Rohn used to say, we're the net sum of the 5 closest relationships that we have, or the people that we tend to hang out with the most. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. There's power in association. And so if you're hanging out with a bunch of people that are also Eeyores, I mean, you don't know any other way. Like it's just, that's normal.
It's your world.
It's just, it's exactly right. It's your world perspective. And, and I've been down that path. I've had many points in my life where my perspective was not serving me, but I wasn't really aware of it. And nor was I willing to open my eyes to it, until usually you have one of those, oh heck moments, where it's like, wow, there's a big change that's looking like that boulder that's coming down my path. And if I don't make a change right now, it is going to squish me. And there's going to be drastic shifts in my life that are going to happen as a result. Do I want that? No. Why don't I want that? Well, here's why. And getting back to that why again, that purpose, that meaning, which, as Nietzsche said, like it's like with a strong enough why, we can endure anyhow. And I think there's validity. If you have a big enough purpose, it doesn't matter the challenges that come, it will help you through it.
Hey listeners, this is Philip Pape, and I'm excited to announce our upcoming totally free 21-day challenge starting December 1st. It's called the Wits and Weights No Diet Holiday Body Recomp Challenge. This challenge is about learning how to achieve body recomposition. That's building muscle and losing fat at the same time without dieting or restriction throughout the holidays. I'll be giving you free videos, guides, and personalized coaching in a private group chat to help you enjoy the holidays while being satisfied and guilt-free. The kickoff call is Friday, November 17, and the link to enroll is in the show notes. No matter what episode you are listening to, don't worry. If you're hearing this after November 17, you can still register and get access to the replay and resources before the challenge starts on December 1st. Again, to join the Wits and Weights No Diet Holiday Body Recomp Challenge to build muscle and lose fat without dieting through the holidays, click the link in my show notes. Now back to the episode. I agree. And once you have that purpose, it sounds like another area that people struggle, and you alluded to this, was the input-output system, right? You mentioned inputs and outputs, and that speaks to my engineering mind in the idea that we could either have an open system or a closed system, and if you don't close it with the feedback from the output to the input, then you just aren't aware. You're just not aware, right? And so all of these models are helpful for people to understand of why we do things, why we track something, or collect data, or listen to a podcast, and so on. So that leads me just quite naturally, not intentionally, but quite naturally, to talk of optimization and what does optimal mean, right? Like in the context of physical and mental health, to me, when I hear the word optimal, at least have been conditioned on the word optimal from all the podcasts and things in the fitness world, it's as close to perfection as you can get, right? That's like but then the other side is you're never going to be perfect. So what's best for you? And is that optimal? So what does it mean to you? What does optimal mean to you?
Well, so here's something that I had to learn, and I kind of learned it the hard way because I think I was resistant to it initially, especially as I was aging, entering into my 30s, mid 30s, especially, I was still able to train at high intensities, like very, very high intensity, really challenge myself. And yet my body was changing, there were certain shifts, like things that I would do in my 20s where if I tweaked something the next day, I can go lift again, or I can go train again. Like I just would sort of work through it. And it felt like my body was more resilient or just had this better recovery ability. And it, it may have been true. It may not have been, it could have been just my 20s and my stubbornness, to just push through it. But then as I got into my 30s and as my kids were getting older, I realized that I had to sort of shift things because my life was shifting. And so I had to challenge sort of my belief systems around what is optimal, especially when it comes to health and fitness. Because it's such a big part of my life, just like yourself. Like it's been an integral foundational piece for me. It's really what got me started on this trajectory that I've been on, since I was 15. And I don't discount that, it's important to me. And
yes,
I have to keep honoring that piece in me that knows that if I maintain certain levels of fitness, my health, resiliency, my ability to manage stress, my autonomic nervous system, it's in a much better place. And in my mid 30s, and there was a sort of that critical moment where I really had to own this. And it was forced upon me, full disclosure, forced upon me, I did a Tough Mudder. It was the first time they came to Canada. They did it up at Whistler, BC. I went out for it. We had a number of friends that came and did it with us. It was amazing. I love those kind of obstacle course races. Like I really enjoy it, like Spartan, Tough Mudder. Like I love them. I love them. And I don't do it to race it. I do it to complete it, just to say I did and I can, and I will do it again, and,
yep.
And, after that first Tough Mudder experience, and full disclosure, I'm not a runner. Okay. I'm not a distant runner. I'm a great sprinter.
Sure.
I do not do long distances because I do have a lot of muscle mass and I don't really enjoy running long distances.
I feel you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Okay. I'm preaching to the choir here. But my thighs got chafed and a little bit of a rash after all that, it's like it's about a half marathon distance and I'm not conditioned for that. So I got this little bit of scrape. Within the next 24 hours, just this infection took hold. And my body was systemically shutting down. And we rushed me to the ER. They took a quick blood test. My neutrophils flatlined. And neutrophils is what neutralizes viral infections and bacteria. And they were like, what's going on here? They thought maybe I had a form of leukemia that was undiagnosed. And so there was a lot of fear setting in at this point, right? Sure. And ended up being hospitalized for 10 days. And they had me on this like massive antibiotic drip, and they were pumping me full of Neupogen, which is a common biological drug that they use to treat people that are fighting various forms of cancer because it bolsters your immune system. It gets your bone marrow overproducing neutrophils and other important pieces for our ability to recover and defend ourselves. And anyways, my immune system crashed, and 3 bone marrow biopsies later and a series of other tests, we were able to determine that I have an autoimmune condition that I've probably had all my life up to that point, but had never really been challenged to that extent. And so all of a sudden I became hyper aware that, wow, certain ways that I eat, certain ways that I manage stress, certain ways that I train, especially if it creates huge inflammatory responses, that can be really challenging on my immune system. So all of a sudden here I am in my mid 30s and I'd done things a certain way for so long. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to have to adapt. I need to change. I need to adapt how I'm going to train because I've got this underlying chronic health condition that's not going to go away. But yet I do not want to compromise my quality of life. I still want to be able to do all the things that I want to do. Right. I want to experience all the things I want to experience. I want to live life, to its fullest, no matter my age. And
it's not an excuse. It's an input.
No. It was, but it was challenging because I had to discover new ways of doing things, especially around training and nutrition. Yeah. Nutrition was the biggest one, actually. And but after I endured that and worked through it, it took a couple of years to really develop a new lifestyle from that. It unlocked something in me, And as I pivoted into my 40s, and now I'm just looking down the barrel of the gun at 47, I'm actually the fittest and healthiest than I've ever been in my life. And it didn't happen by accident. But that critical moment at 35 shifted my trajectory entirely. And I had to learn a new way of doing things. But man, it helped. And so my idea of being optimal now is really, it's all about longevity and vitality. Being able to be the best version of myself and be present for myself in my own life, and to live a life where I can say yes to the challenges that presented to me. And I had a client of mine, he wanted this year, we always like to set a big physical goal, because there's also a huge mental piece to those big physical goals. And we decided to do the West Coast Trail. He was going to do it, and it's an 80K hike out in the off-grid, out in the bush, and of the western coastline of Vancouver Island, and very rugged hike. And I was like, you know what, I'll do it with you. And if I didn't have that belief in myself and that confidence in my health, my ability to just navigate that, I wouldn't have said yes. And I would have missed out on one of the greatest things that I've ever experienced in my life, So yeah, anyways, big, long-winded story to sort of try to give you some context there around what optimal means to me.
Not at all. And context is everything. Because that leads to some follow-ups that I wasn't planning on asking, and now it makes a lot of sense when it comes to anyone determining their optimal, because you mentioned health, longevity, vitality, and these are great words, but we want to define things, and we also want to talk about what's relevant to different people, because here's where I'm going. Different people of different ages, different phases of their life. Like you said, in your 20s, very different from your 30s. And then when you discovered your autoimmune condition, and many of us as we get older have injuries, and, stress is higher, and there's lots of changes. So where you're starting on where you want to go and the balance, there are trade-offs. So where I'm going is there are trade-offs to everything. So for example, if someone is just getting started with their lifting and said, well, I want to live a long life, do they compromise some aspects that you care for longevity because they really want to focus on getting super strong and eating more food, which they wouldn't do forever because it could impact their longevity? You get what I'm saying? Yeah.
I do.
All the goals, all the health goals we have, performance, physique, longevity, they sometimes conflict. And so what are your thoughts on that?
That's a great point. Wonderful point, actually, Philip. And I appreciate you just giving me that sort of clarity around that question, I guess I just to play with the example that you shared, is someone had this goal to be super strong, right? And maybe to put on quite a bit of muscle mass in conjunction with that. So obviously, their calorie intake's going to go up, but also their volume, their training volume will probably go up as well, especially when it comes to loading and time under tension, all that other good stuff. But my biggest question to them would be, why? Why? What is it about that goal that's really pulling you right now? And it is. A goal should be pulling, not just pushing, right? You're pushing yourself to go for the goal, but that goal, is it like a magnet pulling you towards it? But why? What is the outcome? What does it look like when you're there? Can you define what there is? Because I think it's important for them to understand what is that motivation, both intrinsically and extrinsically, that's helping them channel this energy and commitment, because you're right. Everything comes with a cost. I'm going to say yes to this. There's going to be inevitably things I'm going to have to say no to. It's like, oh, I wanted to train for my first Ironman. And I'm like, well, you want to do that and get super strong? Well, you know what? That might not work very well for you. You're going to be really eating a lot, and you're going to be training all the time. And yet you're running a successful business. You're putting in 50 to 60 hours a week plus your family time. When are you going to make it all happen? Right? Let's get real. Yeah. That struggle with the juggle is legit, man. And so that's just one example. I think it has to be more context through conversation and clarity through dialogue, but I know for myself, when I have those inner conversations, it's always nice to talk to somebody externally, whether it's a coach, a mentor, an accountability partner. I mean, whatever that is, it's nice to have a sounding board to sort of speak through the ideas and the things that we want to accomplish or do. And and recognize it might just be a season of that, that season could, I'm not saying it's like 3 months, like a quarter and a year, maybe it's a couple of years. That will be your commitment. I look at professional bodybuilders. I mean, they have an off season, guys.
Oh, yeah. That's a great example.
And so it's recognizing the seasonality of it all as well.
Shout out to Felipe. I know Felipe for a long time, and I know how passionate he is about healthy eating and body strength. And that's why I chose him to be my coach. I was no stranger to dieting and body training, but I always struggled to do it sustainably. Philip helped me prioritize my goals with evidence-based recommendations while not overstressing my body and not feeling like I'm starving. In 6 months, I lost 45 pounds without drastically changing the foods I enjoy, but now I have a more balanced diet. I weight train consistently, but most importantly, I do it sustainably. If a scientifically sound, healthy diet and a lean, strong body is what you're looking for, Philip Pape is your guy.
I competed for the first time again in the CrossFit Open this year, but I'd taken a hiatus for about 6 or 7 years. I had a couple hernias, and you talked about injuries, a shoulder injury. Like I could list off all the injuries I've had, right? And so I just wanted to take a break from the competition side of things so I could just get back to a place of just feeling great, waking up in the morning, not feeling any aches and pains. But it took a lot of time for me to really focus on mobility, flexibility, as well as conditioning with body weight exercises, calisthenics. And so I took a break from lifting for a while, and my body thrived and it was awesome. And then I started to introduce weights again, but I'm not going to go for 1 rep maxes. I don't even go for 3 rep maxes that often, unless it's a testing cycle at the beginning or the end of like a cycle of training. And that works for me. It works for me. And because I understand what optimal means for me, I understand what my expectations are of me, and I also know why I'm doing it. And I think that is the clarity piece that people require to really fully answer the question that you asked,
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to come to the why. I have a question related to that, but first, the concept of mixing things up and all these things you've tried and experimented, that strikes me as a very valuable thing to do as well. Of sometimes you don't know why, not that you don't know the deep why behind your overall activities in your life, but sometimes you don't know whether or why to do something specifically, right? Like you said, the CrossFit Games. Somebody might be interested in that, and when you ask them why, just because I want to, there may not be a deep why to that one, in my opinion, I think, because of personal experience, even though there's a bigger why to their life. So in trying to figure out your why, I'm assuming there's no wrong answer, right? Everybody's why is their why.
Correct.
How does someone do that when they just want to try something for the first time? Let's say they want to get shredded, they've gone around, they built all this muscle, and they're like, you know what those bodybuilders do? I know it's crazy. Everybody said they're miserable at the end of the cut. I don't care. I really want to see if I can do it. Is that a good enough why? You know what I mean? So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's absolutely correct to say, is it a big enough why? For them, it is. Just to prove to them, because it does require, like, to get to that level of leanness. It is a commitment, and it is not easy at all. For the longest time in my past company, one of our key guys, was a professional natural bodybuilder, and so during the season, though, especially when he was cutting for competition, God, it was miserable. It was like walking around on eggshells, and he had his watch and his phone. He had all these redundancies set, walked around with this massive cooler, and it'd be like, I'm not going to go talk to that customer right now because my watch went off a minute ago and I got to eat right now. And it was like, just the level of rigidity and non-negotiables was immense. But for him, it was the mental challenge of it all. Like mentally sound. Like, I have never met somebody so committed to an end result. And it's also why he's been extremely successful, in every competition he's placed in the top, and it's phenomenal. But it came with a lot of, and I'm going to say the word, sacrifice, for sure. And so the why, and I think this is kind of the interesting thing, we think about, like, what's the meaning of life? Well, it's like, well, what's the meaning of life to you? And whatever answer that person gives, great. That's true to them. There's no right or wrong. That's their perspective. Sure. You define the meaning in your own life. And I think the same can apply with the why. And if it's just to prove that, hey, I can do something really hard, just to say I've done it, and I've done things like that too. I did stand-up comedy as an example. Like, I needed a challenge, and it was something that intimidated the heck out of me. And I was like, gosh, getting up on stage for 5 minutes and trying to make people laugh, well, that sounds really freaking hard. and that scares the poop out of me, And I was like, you know what, though? want to do it just to say I did it. And then after I did it, I was like, man, could I do it again? And I repeated it. I did it a second time, and now I've had a break for a number of months, but it was nice, to do something that I was so intimidated by. And to come out on the other side after it all happened and realize, you know what, it wasn't as bad as I envisioned it was going to be,
Yes. Yes.
And so that's, again, some stories to sort of get some context here, but that's some of my beliefs around it,
Yeah, but that's another very powerful thought, that doing something intimidating, you said, quote, doing something intimidating was nice. And there's a lot in that statement, because I can think of any time I've done something scary. Like for me in Toastmasters, doing speech contests was scary.
Nice.
They're still scary, and still do them. And I've actually blanked out on stage, and I still do them because I know there's some growth that comes from that regardless. And things that are easy, you just don't get that growth from, right? They're easy. There's it's kind of like in positive psychology, there's a model of, what is it here? It's flow. The flow model, getting into flow, where the optimal state of flow is the right balance between skill and challenge. So if your challenge it's too high, you're just going to have anxiety, because there's no way you could possibly deal with it right now. But if the challenge is just past your skills, it gets you in that state of like deep, undistracted flow toward that. Anyway, I'm also getting off on tangents here.
No, it's not. I think it's all relevant to the conversation we're having. I love it. I absolutely love it, Philip.
Yeah.
I love the way your mind works as well. So continue.
No. Okay. So if somebody says, here's how I want to do this, you've had those conversations, they've challenged themselves, maybe have good people in their life to challenge them. Yeah. And then they want to take the steps forward. We know that on day 2, your plan goes out the window. Like, that's just reality. Okay? And so, at least the way I put it with my clients is like, we're almost never going to be on the path, but we're going to be somewhere near it, and we'll end up at the destination. Right. And so you've got to have the if then kind of choices and contingencies along the way. So given that there's uncertainty, that there's change, that there's complexity, how do you adapt your strategies to quote unquote optimize so you keep going forward?
Yeah, I guess it depends on what aspect of our lives or life that we're looking to optimize, because I always recognize that there's probably areas that need more attention than others. And yet we all like to do things that we do really well at, and so it's also finding sort of that ability to shift between those two areas and recognize that, there's going to be some of these things I'm going to have to develop new skills. It's things I haven't done before or I've never done very well. Well, it's going to need some extra time and attention, maybe some extra resources. Maybe I need to hire a coach or someone to support me through that. Like I do workshops frequently. Like I did with my younger daughter. We went and did a gymnastics workshop that focused predominantly on rings and handstands. And why? Because I'm a big dude, man. I'm 210, like 6'1", and there's nothing light about me. And trying to do gymnastics, especially on rings, it's tough, really tough. It's hard on my body. But I also know it's like, I believe I have the strength, but I know I don't have the technique and the skill. So, we did a 6-hour workshop and it helped. By the end of it, I was doing muscle ups and it was awesome. I was like, wow, and so that confidence and that confirmation that I can do something that I believed I couldn't do before, that was the piece that really solidified why I committed to doing it, because I love having those little self-discovery moments where it's like, holy smokes, I did it. Wow. Like I always laugh about Nike, just do it. What a great slogan. It's awesome. But you know what's better than that? I just did it. Like that is freaking amazing, because it's the completion or the result of the action that we committed to doing, especially when a lot of times there's huge uncertainty. We don't know the future. We don't know what will happen when we try that thing. And so it's this self-trust, I believe, that we sort of foster in ourselves as we just navigate these paths, as you mentioned. But also remember, sometimes you got to go bushwhacking. There might not be a path there for you to follow, that's okay. It's okay. You're capable. And what's the worst case scenario? I always, Tim Ferriss, that TED talk he did, I don't know how long ago, maybe it was 15, 16 years ago, but he talks about fear setting exercises, this idea of just asking yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen if I go and try to do this thing? He's taking that sort of stoic philosophy and he's applying it to that, and just saying, like, what is the worst case scenarios?
Yeah.
Because when you start to look at it, you can actually, logic will take over because a lot of it's fear-based, right? But then all of a sudden, when you let logic sort of look at it, it's like, would that really happen? I mean, I guess it could. Could aliens come down and, I mean, it could happen. But will it? No, I'm going to be able to do Spartan that day.
That is true.
And so, but I found that exercise really, really powerful for myself because it helped me eliminate a lot of these fears that I knew were there, but I couldn't necessarily articulate or reason through. And sometimes you just got to go through that process,
Yeah. Now the exercise specifically you're talking about now is just asking what's the worst that can happen. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I love that because so I had mentioned before flow and challenge and everything, but even if something does seem insurmountable, why not try it anyway, potentially, and at least push yourself toward that, thing. You mentioned that new challenging things require extra resources. That stuck with me too, because it brought up two things. One is the idea of balance of you can't be doing challenging things all day necessarily because you get burned out. I can tell you, I can go all day, and when my brain is starting to feel tired before my body feels tired, I know I've just been doing too many just on things, and I have to go and sit, or go for a walk, or talk to my wife, or play a video game. I don't care what it is, something that requires no brain power whatsoever.
Yes.
That, and then also the fact that when you have a new, very challenging thing, especially when it's brand new, like it could be, like you said, lifting the bar for the first time, or whatever. For me, when it was 12 years ago, joining Toastmasters for the first time, and I had never done this before, of taking the time and decide what do you need in your life to support that. Like, don't just waddle around, hoping that it'll work in the same way all of your high strength existing skills work, but rather, do I need a group to join? Do I need to read a book? Do I need to join a course? Do I get a coach? Just take time to think about it in my daily schedule and so on. I'm not really asking a question here other than trying to connect with everything you said because I think it's great.
I agree. I agree. And, Toastmasters for me, it opened up a whole new path in my life because I was intimidated by public speaking, that idea of speaking in front of a group, especially large groups of peers or even people in my own industry, even though people that I believe I'm part of the same tribe, like that intimidated the heck out of me, like very, very much fearful of it, and Toastmasters was that thing that allowed me to channel through it. And do I still get nervous as all heck? Yeah, I do. Do my hands sweat? Does my heart rate race? Yeah, it all does. But I can channel that sort of anxiety or anxiousness into something that can make an impact. And that was why I wanted to do it, because I believed I was being called to do something more. And I think we all are on that path. We all have that sort of inkling in us that's pulling us to do something greater than we thought we were capable of doing, because we do have that potential. And then it's just unfortunate. A lot of times it goes unrealized, and all it took was a mentor to tell me, like when I asked him, I said, listen, you're amazing at this. Like, what's one thing I could do to just be a little bit like you? He's like, I'll give you one word: Toastmasters. That was a Friday conversation. I went home and I Googled on the Toastmasters website. I found my nearest club location. I showed up on the Monday morning, and it was called Early Edition Toastmasters because they meet at 6:30 Monday mornings. And it became a part of my everyday for the next 4.5 years. And then eventually moved on because we moved and relocated. So I found a new club, but it's always been a part of my life, and it's helped so much, so much. Yeah.
I think it's an amazing organization. And I've talked about it on this show multiple times, and I've met guests who I had no idea. And afterward, they're like, hey, have you heard of Toastmasters? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I tell everybody about it. I say, at least for me, 2 things that'll improve your confidence dramatically is lift weights, heavy weights, and join Toastmasters, like both those things, among others, right?
But you're right, though.
Yeah.
I agree.
But you mentioned also the nervousness, and somebody mentioned recently she just started a podcast. So I love talking to people so I'm coming up on episode 100, and awesome. I feel like I just started and I'm still have a lot to grow, but then I realized people just getting started, have a lot of anxiety about the technical side and speaking to people and so on. And I said, that just means you care, and it's something you should be doing. Like everything that makes me nervous in my life, I continue to gravitate toward because I think there's value there. What do you think of that?
I agree, 100%. It's I just sort of looking at that as a filter at my own life, and you're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
You know, and was it hard to make the commitment to even push myself to try those things? Yeah.
Yes.
But just trying is one thing, but showing up the second time and a third time, you know, to sort of long-winded circle here, you know, to get back to your questions, like day 2, the plan goes out the window. Well, it's just that, but you showed up for day 2. You know, you showed up for it. You did it day 1. And then like, I still coach CrossFit. You know, I'm the fill-in guy at the gym. Like, so just if the other coaches are sick and they need someone to cover, I'll go in and I'll cover, because I love the community element. I love coaching and helping people. And so I like to be part of that community and support it that way. And I always say to people, like, you know, especially when you get these new people here, I'm like, yeah, sure. They show up for that first session, right? And they might have done a foundations and then they show up to class for the first time, or maybe they just came from, you know, a regular sort of a Globo gym, you know, where they've had more of a traditional sort of history of training. Now they're being introduced to CrossFit for the first time, which is very different than what I was accustomed to prior to joining CrossFit, trying it for the first time. But those people that show up for the second time, I'm like, good on you. You know, good on you. And I think it's phenomenal. And I like to remind people, because I often will have these conversations with women and we talk about lifting weights and getting stronger and the confidence it does for them. And so many women I've met have said, I'd love to just be able to do a pull-up. I'd love to be able to pull my dead weight hanging on a bar to get my chin above it. And I'm like, you know what? That's a great goal to work towards. And, you know, we'll start with, you know, maybe some ring rows, you know, maybe we'll get to some elevated feet ring rows. We'll use a band on the bar. We'll start to condition your body to be able to handle that. Then here's the cool thing. I know you can do it and you're going to get there. And the day that you get that first pull up, that's 100% improvement. You know, like how often do you get to say, I have 100% improvement? Like that's perfection, right? Now, after that, it's diminishing returns, but you know, regardless, to go from 0 to 1 is always the most rewarding part of the process, you know, always. And the confidence and belief that comes from that achievement is remarkable. And so I always encourage people is, you're going to get started and you're going to hit that first milestone and realize it's the first of many, but that first one is so critical because it will set the tone as well as the path for you to follow after, you know? And so it's just maintaining your self-commitment to that first milestone.
Well, and I'm making a connection between that first of something and kind of the dopamine hit you get. And like you talked about fun, that is a version of fun. And it's knowing that it's hard, embrace that, right? Because knowing that it's hard means when you do it, it's going to be fun. And we're kind of connecting it all back. I was thinking just this week. Yeah. So I started lifting again last week with 3 limbs.
How's the shoulder? Is your shoulder okay?
I can't use it. I'm not allowed to use it for lifting yet. But I tried a 1-arm deadlift, not a 1-leg deadlift, a 1-arm deadlift. And I was like, this is pretty cool. But I was all wobbly and weird. And, you know, stabilization wasn't there because it's like you're a newbie again. And it was all wonky and out of balance, but I did it. And then today I did it again. I'm like, it was super solid and felt light. And it always reminds me how quickly, you know, you make progress. Like you said, eventually it's diminishing returns, but that initial burst and that adaptation you get from it applies to anything, not just for physical. Don't you agree?
That's right.
It's everything. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, it's awesome, but it's the, like why I keep and why I've been coaching and mentoring people for almost 30 years now is I love being able to see, I told you so. I saw that potential in you. Yeah. I teased it out a little bit and you did it. And now you know you did it and you did that. You did that. I didn't do it. You did that, you know? And that is that fulfillment piece that I get. I just absolutely love that moment where they're like, yeah, you did tell me. And I did do it. And it's like, just seeing that in their eyes is like, oh man, it's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah.
I agree. And I think that comes from maybe our confidence as well, knowing that it's going to work for them. So then the counter to that, just to be on the little slightly negative side here is people have self-doubt because they've tried many things to get that outcome. And we know in health and fitness, this is all the time because I hear people say, I'm in my 40s or 50s. Now the weight's not coming off or whatever's not happening. And what I used to do doesn't work anymore. Or, you know, I run a lot and I work out 7 days a week. Why isn't it working? You know, or I've been cutting calories for 3 years. Why isn't it working? Right. And I'm being a little facetious, but how does someone get that confidence back without being manipulated or thinking that they're going to meet up with another huckster or charlatan? Because there's so many out there.
Yeah.
How do we give people their own power and agency to recognize that and find that person?
I think the agency word is great because that's really what it boils down to, right? And but trying to think of an example. I guess if you think about health, because let's talk about health. Let's talk about fitness. It's helping them achieve that first win. I find people with that sort of negative mindset, or that maybe that disbelief that they can do it because they've had so many previous experiences that has been able to prove this new bias that they have for themselves, right? Like it's a bias. Yes. It's like I have this underlying bias that I don't believe I can do it. And I'm like, well, do you understand what these biases do? It's like little programs that run in the background, and you're going to do whatever you can, especially your subconscious, to prove that that's a correct belief. And so that idea of self-sabotage is very, very real. Man, I don't know how many times I've done it. Okay. I don't think anybody is immune to it, but recognizing when it's happening is a skill that can be developed. That self-talk can be developed. It can be nurtured. And I think that's a good place to always begin. It's that awareness piece, that mindfulness piece of oneself, and some of those past beliefs being challenged. And I find the simplest way to do that is help them achieve a win very early on, something that does give that little dopamine hit, right? But also it's like, whoa, okay, I didn't believe I could lose this extra 5 pounds. And yet I just did, and I'm like, well, you didn't lose it. You released it. It's gone, man. It's never coming back, and right. And they're like, oh yeah, you're right. But also now it's this belief is now being redefined. And it didn't take a massive shift, a full 180 change in direction to make that happen. So it's starting with that smallest of wins. And I find that if you have that and you have it early enough on, it's going to be the unwinding of a lot of those belief systems that might have been ruling your life up to that moment. And here's the crazy thing is those belief systems, they're connected to all areas of our life. All areas. It impacts everything. Everything. Sure. It's not just a fitness thing. It's not just a nutrition thing. It's not just a mental health. It's everything. And if you believe that it's an isolated thing that doesn't affect other areas, I'm just going to say it. You're wrong. You're wrong. And if you look at the web of your life, you'll see that everything's interconnected. And so the way there's that quote, I forget who said it, but the way you do anything is the way you do everything. It's true. It's true. Yeah. Like you'll see that belief system repeat itself in other ways. And so it's important to learn a new way of doing things,
Oh, what you just said reminds me of the broaden and build theory from psychology. I think it's Barbara, what's her last name? I should know this. Broaden and build, the idea that your personal resources spiral upward once you get these wins, or once you start to change your belief, like you said, on one thing, it just makes the others, it unlocks the rest, and it spirals up. Cool. The opposite of a downward spiral, right?
Very cool.
And that's true. So the other thing that came to mind there, Dai, is like when we say I can't, if we can just use our logical brain and really dissect, are we talking about a physical limitation in the law of physics, right? Like in the law of the universe, like I can't fly. Okay. All right. Like logically that's true. But 99.9% of the time, the I can't is more of a self-limiting belief, like you said. Correct. It's not, and so just assume that you can and see what that does for you. I don't know. That's my thought on it. It's like,
I agree. Yeah. And I'll challenge people when I hear that. I'm like, no, I'd rather you just choose not to. Like I want you to be fully aware that you're choosing not to do this. It's not a matter of you're limited, like you don't have the ability to do it. You're choosing not to do it. You're choosing not to prioritize yourself. It's like, that's okay. But it's not, listen, you are talented. You are capable. You have been gifted this life to accomplish cool stuff. And if you keep saying that you can't do it, it's not a matter of can't. It's just that you're choosing not to. Yeah. Own it. And if you own it, I'm okay with that. And you should be okay with it too. And stop complaining about it. Stop talking about it. Just own that that's your decision. You're not going to do it. Like I had to get to that place of surfing as an example. We were living in Bali for 2.5 years before the pandemic. And I was like, everybody surfs here. Man, it looks cool. I want to try it. I had a bunch of lessons, kept trying it. And then I got to a place where I was like, I'm doing this because it looks cool. I'm not actually doing it because I enjoy it, because I don't enjoy it. Keep getting pummeled. It's not, I'm a sinker. I'm not a swimmer. Okay. And, I was just like, no, I choose not to do surfing. I choose not to surf. I'm okay with that. But I had to get to that place to own it, because I found myself saying, I can't surf. I found myself saying that, and I hate it. My wife is like, she's really funny, but she's like, no, that's a 4-letter C word we never say in our house, and I'm like,
you choose not to surf, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I had to get to a place to say, I choose not to surf. I'm okay with that, and I own it, and I've got no problem with that. I don't think about like, oh man, I failed or I didn't. Like, I got to a place I was just like, I choose. There's other things I'd rather do.
It's true. Yeah.
And so, you're right. The way we talk to ourselves and the way we speak is so critical. And that's also something very valuable we learned through Toastmasters, right? Through that practice and feedback. Yes. It's amazing to see some of the defaults that we have when it comes to communicating, not only with ourselves, but especially with others.
Agree. And that feedback just gives you more knowledge of who you are and what you can do. And, the counter to the surfing example, because that reminds me of something that you maybe could have gotten good at, but you just chose not to do because you didn't enjoy it. The opposite would be you might be good at things and not enjoy them as well, right? And it's okay. Just choose not to do them. And so I want to respect your time. We only have a few minutes. I did want to ask one. I could talk to you for hours, Dai. This has been awesome.
Thanks, Philip.
I never know what's going to come of these.
Jamming, man. I'm jamming. I love this, man. It's been a great conversation. Yeah.
But I do ask this of everyone on the show. So I don't know if you heard one of my shows toward the end, and that is, what one question did you wish I had asked, and what is your answer?
Well, I heard this question, and I've been thinking about it, and for me, it's rather cliche, to be honest with you. It's like, if given the opportunity to do anything different, would I choose to do it differently?
Yeah.
And I think about some of those really hard moments in my life. Really hard moments, like when I struggled with alcohol and narcotics. There's a period of my life there that was really dark, and it's easy. There's a part of me that's like, I wish that never happened, because there was a lot of shame and guilt wrapped up in that, and a lot of self ridicule, and it's a hard place to come from, especially when you're trying to make changes, because you feel like you got this ball and chain that's just dragging behind you. But it's those amazing struggles in my life. And I can say amazing now. When I'm going through it, I wouldn't say it was amazing. But in reflecting and after introspecting and looking at where my life went as a result of me saying, you know what, I'm worth the change. And I'm choosing my life over this thing that was consuming my life. I would do it all the same. I would. Even knowing that was the path I was on and that was coming and I was going to have to go through it again, I would do it. Because my life right now is a result of that moment in time that I had to go through that struggle. And that's something that I always think about. I'm like, man, if I could redo things, would I redo it? And because it's amazing how the mind works. Plus, I love sci-fi. You can see all my comic books behind me.
And
just
alternate
all that
realities.
Stuff. Totally, like the metaverse, right? And so I love.
And how that story goes, though, with the alternate reality. It's always worse.
Correct. Yeah. Well, that's what they tend to. They keep hammering that home, right? And if anyone's seen that new Flash movie, they really hammer it home in that quite well. But it wasn't a great movie. But anyways, I digress. But that would be the question. That would be the question. Yeah.
No, I love it. I thought initially you were saying that my question was cliche, and I was like, "Where does he go with this?" And you were saying
I meant I got
that after a second or two.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So, last question, of course, is where do you want folks to learn more about you and your work, Dai?
Well, thank you, Philip, again for today's conversation, and thank you for creating a space to capture these conversations. All of us get to be flies on the wall and learn all these new perspectives, but also, it's hearing that one little nugget that shifts everything, right? It's just immense. And so thank you for putting so much value at all of us. And, for me, I'm very active on Instagram, LinkedIn, and fairly active on Facebook, but I would say Instagram and LinkedIn, easiest places to find me. If you can spell my name right, you'll find me because I'm like the only one with it, and Dai is a Welsh name for David, D-A-I. Manuel is Portuguese, M-A-N-U-E-L. I know people are like, whoa, that's weird. And I'm like, yeah, it's weird. But I'm Canadian. Don't worry about it. Okay. So
there you go.
I'm just a blend. And reach out, connect. I love having conversations. I love hearing what people are proud of accomplishing. What are they working towards? I just love hearing stories. So please share.
There it is. And thank you for filling this space. I mean, you talked about the space, but thank you for filling it with so much energy today. To bursting. It was wonderful. I'll throw the links in there for your IG, your LinkedIn, and also your book, The Whole Life Fitness Manifesto. I can throw that in as well, Philip. So people find out about it. And that's it. Thank you again for coming on the show. It was a blast.
Philip, thank you. I honestly really honored. And finally, I'm in the process of prepping to get my own podcast. I can't wait to get you on so I can grill you.
Yeah. I would love it. I love jamming. Let's do it.
Yeah, it's on.
All right. Take it easy.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Wits and Weights. If you found value in today's episode and know someone else who's looking to level up their wits or weights, please take a moment to share this episode with them. And make sure to hit the follow button in your podcast platform right now to catch the next episode. Until then, stay strong.